Recording in progress.
All right, so welcome back to Think Differently. We are talking today about networking strategies. Actually, that's kind of my theme for the month of February. So if we've met before in most people who come into my world kind of start through my networking events called Real Connections. And we've been doing those now for coming up on exactly 2 years. So next week is the big Real Connections 2-year anniversary party. Very much looking forward to that. And then this month, Think Differently is around 2 different networking hot topics, if you will. One this week and one next week. So this week, today, we're talking about how to make networking work for you, and specifically solving 2 problems that I hear people talk about a lot, which is either it drains them and or they get friend zoned. So we're going to be talking about how to not get drained, especially if you're an introvert, how to not get friend zoned. We cannot control the other party on the other end, but we have a lot of charge and control and power in our own experience. And so how can you do the part that you can do to not get friend zoned so that networking actually works for you, to create clients, to create referral partners, to create, those out of the blue, like, oh my God, I just got a discovery call because somebody sent them to me. So basically the whole month is how to make networking work for you. All right, let me just pull up my notes. As you guys are live, just ask any questions you want in the chat and I will answer them as we go. Oh, and then next week we're talking about, so this week is about solving that drained or friend zone problem. Next week, I'm calling next week networking strategies that actually work to create clients, referrals, and raving fans. So today's a little more of how to hold boundaries and think about things so that you don't end up in the friend zone or draining yourself. And then next week is a lot more strategic, proactive in terms of how to really set yourself and frankly set your business up. If you want to use networking as a strategy, how to do that as an actual strategy instead of kind of without intention, kind of floating around and hoping, something will stick. All right. I think somebody else just joined. Hold on. Did I just get a little beep? No. Okay. All right. So I don't think I need to talk about this too much, because if you've been doing any networking at all, you've probably already experienced this. So let me quickly just back up. I have been in business for more than 7 years now. I think I'm at like 7.5. And when I started my business, I was living in San Francisco at the time. And San Francisco, just like a lot of big cities, but especially, I don't know, I think San Francisco is like the hub for, startups. It's got Silicon Valley. It's just like everybody and their brother has 8 jobs and 2 businesses. And, everybody's just running around doing all kinds of different things. And it is a fantastic, hotbed, in a good way, for entrepreneurial events, networking, luncheons, conferences, etc. And when I started my business, I think I used social media a tiny bit, but my first 2 years, I was major on the networking scene. I did in-person events like it was my job, and it was, and I think that those 2 years were where I got really good at mastering having conversations, weeding through all the 10, 15, 40 people in the room to find the 2 people that I needed to talk to. Having those conversations, I experienced getting friend zoned. I experienced getting drained and burnt out. As a part introvert, part extrovert, those in-person meetings, they wore me out. And also they were like a full day event, because, if I wasn't going maybe 20, 30 minutes away from my house to get downtown, I was driving all over creation. And that would be like a, minimum 1 hour to drive, 2-hour event, an hour to get home. That's basically your day and you're exhausted. And so I did the thing. I friend zoned myself. I got friend zoned by accident. I got friend zoned on purpose. Because I was so excited, honestly, to work with people that became my friends, that I just kind of swung a little bit too far into that sometimes. So I got drained, and then I also sort of found a sweet spot, and it depended on the month and the season. But I I say this to say I feel you. I've heard every complaint in the book from colleagues and clients on these areas, and I have probably experienced everything that we're going to talk about today. So I want to say that from the perspective of, at the same time, all of these things, networking is still, to this day, 7 years later, my number one strategy. The number one source of all my clients and referrals and good leads come from networking or some word of mouth experience that I've created for myself. I also use social media. It is not the only way that I operate or that I market myself, but it is the number one driver of my results. And so I say this also from the perspective of somebody who has stayed the course and let it work for her. And I've really seen the compounded results in my efforts over the years. Like, I'm still getting referrals from people that I met in those 2 years. So it does work. And we're going to talk about that this weekend, next week. So, okay. So a couple of I think I've already talked about this, but I think a lot of times what happens is people get burnt out and people get drained. Whether you are and sometimes the burnout is, I just went to too many meetings, right? Sometimes the burnout is, or the draining is, I had too many one-on-one coffee chats. Sometimes it's not about volume. And a lot of times we think it is, and I'm not sitting here telling you that you need to have like 80 coffee chats a week or a month or a year. I do think most people overdo it. And I'm just going to say that right out front. Most people overdo it. And it's just like, right, it is February 6th, right? This is the time of year that everybody was like, oh yeah, that New Year's resolution I had? Yeah, that shit's in the trash now, right? Like, because it wasn't sustainable, because we went out too hard, because we said, I'm going to talk to 100 people in 100 days, and I'm going to do this and that. And like, that's great. And I'm so here for a big fat goal. And I really want to honor those big fat goals. It's absolutely a big piece of the work that I do, is to help my clients accomplish those goals. But it's also about getting excited and setting a big fat goal, and then like having a realistic plan so that you can execute around normal life and normal business, because life and business will do life and business. And 100 chats in 100 days, as an example, I just made that up, but I feel like I've literally heard that. It's just not sustainable. And even the people who do that, they're then focused on numbers, quantity over quality. And if you hear nothing else today, part of why you're drained is because you're not getting the quality out of your networking conversations. And that will wear anybody out. That's the same if you do like 4 reels a day on Instagram and you focus on numbers and views. And maybe those views are popular, right? Like, I could talk about the political situation right now and get a ton of views on my thing, but it doesn't mean it's going to convert into paying clients. It doesn't mean it's going to attract people who want support with running their business and creating their business around their life, instead of the other way around, right? That doesn't, those two things don't mean it. Those does not compute, right? What is the the magical thing in statistics is correlation does not mean causation, right? So just because I got a shit ton of views on my reel does not mean that it paid me a lot of money in clients. And so same with coffee chats, same with number of networking events you go to. Number does not mean shit. And I say this as somebody who has done a lot. And I also want to say there is a time and a place, and we're going to talk about this. There's a time and a place for getting some numbers under your belt. If your focus right now in your business is reach, is exposure, is creating traffic, then by all means go for it. But it's still only going to serve you. It's back to that 80-20 principle. It's still only going to serve you if you're in the right rooms, talking to the right people, telling them what they need to hear so that they can either become a client or send you a client or become a good collaborator. They need to know, you have to tell them what they need to know to be able to give you the goods, right? And you have to be able to also give them good stuff back so that you have a, interchange relationship. Okay, somebody's joining us. Hang on one sec. Okay, if you've got questions, let me know. Oh, this is weird. It's like hiding the person. Here we go. Okay. So basically, getting back to that quality, being in the right room with the right people, giving them the right information, it's no different than social media, right? Like I could post 14 times a day and get all these views, as I was just saying, but it doesn't mean that it's converting into paying clients. And so I would be better off posting once a week and putting out a really high quality post that people want to engage with and that make people go, oh, maybe she's the right business coach for me, right? That's going to serve me always. And same with networking. Okay, so if you're just joining us, we're talking about networking today, and actually we're talking about networking next week as well. And this is all about how to not get friend zoned and how to not get drained so that you can make this work for you sustainably. I don't know why I'm whispering. Sustainably. Okay, so problems that I'm hearing from around this drained and friend zone thing. So a lot of times it comes to you're going after numbers, quantity, and you're not going after quality. Oftentimes I find that people get drained or friend zoned because we're just not treating it like a business call. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today, but I just want to sort of quickly highlight, like, that's a really good, important thing. I don't want to go off in a tangent, but one of the things that I often ask my client is like, what is it that you need? And we have to make sure that you're getting not that you're getting your needs met by your business exactly, but that you're covered, right? Like if you need to take care of your health, that your health is taken care of before or appropriately while you're also taking care of and serving your clients, as an example, right? That you and the business are both being taken care of. But oftentimes we want to like unhealthily intertwine ourselves with our business, right? Your business is of you, especially if you're doing something that feels deeply, deeply personal and important to you. And I hope you're using your gifts and your zone of genius and all that, but your business is not you, right? And it's really, really important. There are certain moments where I will always bring my clients back to that question of like, wait, is this what you need or is this what your business needs? And let's just take a moment and make sure everybody gets covered, not just one of you. And so again, if you can, one of the things that I'll often ask my clients is like, what do you think your business needs right now? Same on your networking calls, when you're deciding what events to join, when you're deciding whether or not to say yes to a coffee chat, for example, that someone's invited you to. It's a really great opportunity to just go, how can I treat this like a business call? Is there a business reason why I'm getting on this call, right? And if it's not, then just honoring that and acknowledging that and then making a decision around your time appropriately, treating that as a personal thing, not a business thing, it is important. And then the other reason that I think most people get drained or friend zone is because simply they're not setting boundaries. And there's an intentionality with that I think is even more important than like communicating. Like you don't need to like hop on a one-on-one coffee chat and be like, okay, we're not going to do this and we're not going to do that and don't pitch to me, right? Like you don't need to do that. But knowing within yourself, making some very clear decisions of this is what I'm here for, this is what I'm here to do. I'm going to treat it like a business call and this is why I'm meeting with this person. And I want to make sure I tell them these two things and I want to make sure I ask them these two things about them because I think they could be a good collaborator or I think they could refer me business and vice versa or I think they would be a good client, right? So that you have that clear intention. Same with your boundaries, right? I have a clear intention for the call, which also kind of intrinsically means you know what it's for and what it's not for. And then that you are honoring your boundaries around things that we're going to talk about later, like are you going to do a trade if somebody offers you? If somebody wants to do a collaboration, do you in fact have time and does their audience align enough with yours that it would actually make good sense for your business, right? Some of those things are how we often get friend zoned. And it's all with really, really good intention. And again, I just want to say, before I dive into this next piece, I have hired friends, I have had friends become clients, and I have had clients become friends. I do not think there is a problem with friends and client situations mixing. There is only often a problem when we do not pay attention to the hat that we're wearing. I'm thinking of one particular long-term client of mine who was a colleague first. I actually met her networking. I think we actually both paid each other for like a session or two years ago. But we basically just became friends. And then a few years ago, she hired me. And when we had our consultation, we had a whole conversation around how are we going to manage our relationship as friends and friends and colleagues and client coach relationship. And in one way that we do that is we just only communicate business stuff in my Basecamp app where I communicate with my clients. And then we have like a WhatsApp chat where we always manage like personal stuff. And a lot of times even in a call, one of us will be like, oh yeah, I'll update you on WhatsApp on that. Okay, and then we just get back to business so that we can just hold those hats. And it has been so important. And so again, I don't want to go down that road too far, but I do want to say I'm not trying to say you can't do business with your friends. Or you can't become friends, that's all okay, but we just need to be clear, because when you feel drained from networking, it's probably because you're overgiving, you don't have boundaries, you're doing too many calls, right, with the wrong people, or maybe better said, not enough calls with the right people. So you can feel that 80-20 principle kind of operating in reverse. Or you're not setting proper boundaries and being really clear with the person in front of you about like, hey, I really like you and all, and we could probably be friends, but I'm here to have a business chat. So again, I'm going to get into some of these, but these are just the pieces that I see more often than not. People come to me and complain about. Clients come to me and we're working on. But just things that I hear having been really, I don't know what you, not a networker, but like having put networking at the top of my list for the last 7.5 years as far as my strategy. So I've heard a lot is what I'm trying to say. Okay, let me move into, I have 1, 2, 3. I really have 4 things to share, and I've already kind of like given you a few teasers. Okay. All right, ask me questions, guys, as we go in the chat. So the first thing I want to talk about around this is, first off, no, networking isn't for everybody, right? Like some people prioritize networking or speaking or social media, podcast. There's all kinds of ways that you can market your business. Networking is just one. And so if I just want to first say, like, if you hate it, like you don't have to do it, just move on. But if you hate it because you feel like it's not working, that's a different story, right? If you like the idea of talking to people, I'm a one-on-one business coach, you guys. I love talking to people. That is just, I like it. So this works for me because it's a strategy that works. It works for me because it's a strategy that I've worked over the years, but it also just works for me because it's easy for me. So even on a crappy day, it's not a big deal for me to hop on a call with someone and network or go to an event. Versus like if I had to like create some sort of, back in my consulting days, like create some sort of deliverable, that's more training for me. It doesn't mean I can't do both, but I just know that certain things feed me and certain things drain me. Now anything, even coaching, if I serve too many clients at once, I will get drained. But generally speaking, those calls like bring my energy up and feed me. And so this works for me because it aligns with me. If it doesn't align with you, that's okay. You don't have to do it. But if you're going to do it, or if you're going to consider doing it, or if you're going to experiment doing it, or if you're going to up your game doing it, I think it's really important to start looking at both the mindset and the strategy around networking. It is a long game, or better said, it's at least a medium game, right? It is not generally the fastest way to sign a client. But it's kind of like investing in the stock market. Like over time, it always wins. This might not be the best time to be talking about that, but over time, it always wins, right? Like over time, the odds are in your favor. Over time, the compound effect happens. And so, yeah, So I just want to share that that is both the mindset that you need to have. It's okay that I'm playing the long game. That doesn't mean it's not working if like you hop on a call with someone and they don't buy from you right away, right? Just like same with social media. Just because you get a new follower yesterday does not mean they're going to buy within the first week of following you, and that's normal. Same with networking. I've signed many clients on one call. I've signed many clients from years ago, people that I met, and everything in between. But it is the long game. It is a really good strategy and it works really well. And it's something that I am so grateful to past me for all the seeds that I've planted and all the relationships that I've built, because it does work for me. I also am really good at connecting other people, but it is a long game. And so mindset, remember you're playing the long game. Don't look for the quick hit. And frankly, I don't think in business, it's a good idea to look for the quick hit anyway. Quick hits are great when they happen, but living like that that's just not the strategies that I help my clients with. So mindset around this is the long game and it works. And then strategy around my strategy then serves the long game, meaning my strategy is not trying to get somebody to buy today. You can and it will and it does. But recognizing that as I set this strategy out, for example, you want to put follow-ups in your process, right? You don't want to just meet with someone and like hope they follow you on LinkedIn or hope they get on your email list or hope they join your next event or hope they hire you or send you someone someday. Like bringing them down into your customer journey and trusting the long game. That is the strategy. So again, mindset and strategy of it being a long game. And I've got a couple of pieces around that. Is this making sense? Okay, I'm just gonna check. Okay, thank you. Okay. Networking calls seem like a good tool, but they haven't produced much money-wise for me. I've connected with a bunch of people and exchanged, and that's it. Okay, good. We're gonna talk about that. Should your main objective for networking be acquisition of clients or collaborators and networkers? She said jinx, you guys just put that in the chat at the same time. Honestly, I think it should be acquisition of clients and collaborators and collaborators and connectors. I think most people can be both. Not everybody. I mean, it really depends on who you serve. Let me say that very clearly, right? If you serve, like I serve small businesses and I network with small businesses, so it's very easy to see people in both categories. But I think it depends on where you are and what rooms you're in and who you're talking to. And we're going to talk a lot about that next week, a lot about that next week. But I actually think it's both. And then that's my sort of generic answer for anyone. But then I also think, let's see if that then still fits for your business. Because depending on what you do, one or the other might be more of a priority, if that makes sense. But I feel like generally speaking, just very generically as a strategy, the idea is for both. And that honestly, I think that's how you, back to the stock market, like that's how you diversify your portfolio as well. So I say yes to that, to that either or question. Yeah, okay. Okay, so we're playing the long game. That is both a mindset and a strategy. And this is funny, this is kind of back to this question, which is be open to where that connection takes you. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten on a call with someone or met someone in a networking event and thought in the first few minutes, like, or even before the call, right? Like, okay, this person would be a great client. And then I get on the phone, then I get on with them and I talk with them to them for more than a few minutes. And I realize like, no, actually they're not aligned at all. Like I don't want to even make them an offer, right? Because it's just not a fit, or vice versa, right? This person is clearly going to be like a collaborator. I can already see it. We're kind of already connecting in that sort of peer kind of way. Not that you can't serve your peers and your client as a client as well, but I'll just kind of be like, this feels like it's going to be a collaboration. And they're like, ask me, tell me if they're looking for a business coach, or ask me how they can like work with me by the end of the call, right? So I think that part of the long game is being open to where the connection takes you. Again, we're going to talk strategy a lot more next week, but I think it's like prioritizing the calls that have the most potential. And then within that, kind of approaching that call, and I always like to approach my sales calls and recommend my clients approach their sales calls like this as well, which is you walk in the door and you're neutral. I mean, you're neutral, but you're neutral from the perspective of you just don't know what's going to happen, right? You might get on a call with someone, like I said, for the networking, you might get on a sales call and by the end realize that they're not a fit, and it's your job and responsibility to tell them. Right? Or you might get on the call from everything that you know in advance of the call and be like, this is an ideal client. I'm so excited. I'm going to sell them. And then you have the conversation and it's like, oh, right. Or, oh, I'm not sure. I'm going to have to ask some questions. I'm not sure this is right. And then the way they answer the questions or the way they present is completely different, right? So being open, I think, is really important. And just trusting, again, next week we're going to talk a lot about like prioritizing and knowing how to filter through so that you're like getting to the people that you need to be speaking to. But then once you do that, when you get on a call, when you meet somebody at first, to just like not have your filters on, but really just being open-minded to where that conversation leads you, because you never know if their husband meets you or you just don't know who's in their network, who they know that's your clients, if they are your client, if they are like your new business bestie. Like, you just don't know. And I think walking into those calls with a lot of neutrality of like, I'm just going to trust that when I notice a potential, I'm going to follow it. It has served me so well. So being open to where it takes you, which is basically the answer, a little bit of that answer to your question around, should you be looking for clients or looking for connectors? I think the answer is both. But we don't often know where to put people in categories, and they don't necessarily need to be in categories until we know, right? Okay, so being open to that. Yeah, I talked about this a minute ago, but the mindset, when you approach it from the mindset of it's working versus you approach it from the mindset of it's not working. And I see that in business as well. Like if you're posting a bunch of stuff on social media, or you're working a strategy that you don't actually believe is going to work, it's just one of the fastest ways I know to burn out or to feel drained. So where I want to go with that is, so therefore, if we're playing the long game and we're deciding that it's working and we have a strategy in place, which we're going to talk about more strategy tomorrow or next week. I keep saying tomorrow. Then when we show up and we're open to where that connection takes us, we're also not discounting someone who doesn't seem like a direct route to a client. We're not going to discount them and say to ourselves, it's not working, right? We're going to stay open to where that connection and natural conversation takes us. And if it takes us nowhere, fine. But a lot of times we don't actually know where it's going to take us until after that call, right? Sometimes stuff happens in the moment, in an event with multiple people or on a one-on-one call. Sometimes stuff happens right away and it's very obvious and you have a result of some kind. Sometimes you just follow each other for a while and then a connection is made, or you refer clients to each other, or they decide to hire you because they've been in your world for a while, because they've gotten to know you and understand your work. And so just because that first conversation didn't turn into a result does not mean it's not working. And so looking at it from that perspective of this is a strategy, i.e., they are coming into your world and going through your customer journey, however you have it set up, that means it's working. We're not going to evaluate how fast they get to a sales call or how fast they buy or if they ever buy. We're just going to trust that as long as we keep planting those seeds and moving everyone along the customer journey and we have a pipeline, then there's always somebody in all the spots and our business is covered. And then, yeah, and then again, from a strategy perspective, from a mindset perspective, this is generally a seed planting activity, right? We need multiple touch points generally before we hire people and even sometimes before we refer business. It just depends on the conversation and depends on how quickly you connect. And so just remembering this is a seed planting activity, this is a first touch point or second touch point or even third touch point versus like, yeah, so are you gonna pay me or what, right? Which like nobody wants to be on the other end of that. And I think most people in my audience are always less going to come across like that and more worried about coming across like that and more reserved, more not gonna pitch, not gonna make the offer, not gonna say like, hey, I could help you with that if you ever want some help. Like, so I don't think that that's a problem for most people in my world. It's usually the other extreme of like, did you tell them what you do? Did you tell them that you have an offer? Do you remember that? Remember, right? Because we just get flustered, right, sometimes. But I think remembering that you're seed planting, looking at this as a strategy because it is, and looking at what are we trying to accomplish here, and remembering that when it's a first touch point, second touch point, like absolutely people, just like I'm just going to go back to social media. Absolutely, you can put out a killer post and somebody who you've never seen before, who's never followed you, can find it and hire you and like book a call or hire you on the spot. 100% that happens. Is that the norm? No, not for most small businesses. And so what we want to do is keep planting seeds and keep giving them touch points. And that's what, with networking, it's just a little bit different, but it's the same concept. So that's the mindset and the strategy around looking at it that I think works, helps, keeps you in it. And frankly, when you're recognizing that you're playing the long game, you remove the pressure from that conversation. Because when you feel like that conversation needs to turn into a client, I'm sorry, like that's the best way to not sell and not get a client out of it. And it's not to say, because neediness, not to say that that's needy, but neediness or desperation or yeah. So are you going to be a client? Like, even if you don't say that, if your energy is that way, you will at some level come across that way. And nobody wants to be on the receiving end of that. And nobody wants to really do that. So these are the mindset pieces that I like to really focus on. Okay, let me check the chat. That was number 1. Number 2 is really short, and then we'll do 3 and 4. Conflict of interest. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to answer these in reverse. So this one says, perspective is everything. When lurkers become clients, it's fun when that happens. It's like a client garden. I love that. Yes, I'm so big on like planting seeds and reaping and harvesting. And one of the things that I often talk about with my clients when they're feeling that pressure or that stress, whether they actually have it financially or not in their business, doesn't matter. We need to look at the stress and deal with it. But one thing that we always do, and I say along this garden thing, is like, what is your lowest hanging fruit? Like, where are the like apple trees in your garden that are like hanging with apples? Like, go pick that fruit, right? Usually it's in a follow-up to a sales call or somebody that told you a few months ago they needed to hire you in the new year, right? Whatever it is, like those things are usually the fastest path to your next client. And I love the metaphor, right? So we're always planting seeds, we're always harvesting, and then we're also paying attention to the in-between. And that's the place where it's not as interesting and nobody wants to spend time there, but that's the stuff that gets us there. I would like to harvest more clients. Yes. Reap what you sow. Okay, let me check this. How do you manage Oops, what is that little pop-up in my way? How do you manage networking calls that consist of people who do what you do? Okay, I like this question. I suspect people may be hesitant to share because they may see you as a competitor. I personally feel that there's a place for all the coaches. I agree, but not sure everyone does. How do you create opportunities to share what you do when they do what you do? I love this question. A couple of thoughts. I completely share. I believe in collaboration over competition. I believe that there is enough, clients and people and possible business opportunities are not a finite pie. Like there is plenty to go around. So I very much share your perspective. I have a couple thoughts. One is when I was living in San Francisco, one of the as I said, I went to like 4 million different networking events. I was part of different things. That was my primary focus. And I was a member of a women's networking group that I like paid for and went to regular meetings with this relatively the same people-ish every month. And in our chapter, we had for sure 3, but maybe 4. I can't remember now. It's been 5 to 7 years. So of maybe, let's call it a chapter of like 45 people, 3 or 4 of them were speaking coaches. Like that is so specific. And these women met on a, I don't know, monthly or quarterly basis, and they referred business to one another because they did a really beautiful job of finding that Venn diagram overlap of like, oh, this one actually helps you craft your speech, and this one helps you deliver it, and this one kind of does both, but she works more with corporate, whereas these two work more with entrepreneur. Like it was so, and then they were able to speak that to us, right? And educate us on how to send, I'm getting chills, like how to send them good referrals. And it was so beautiful. And I always, I'm still in touch with 2 of those women. And I always think about when my business was a baby, how impactful that was to me to see that modeled. Like that is truly the model, I think, of collaboration over competition. And so with that, I always think of that and I always take that lens. I love to talk to, honestly, other business coaches because we are all different. And I think it's really, really important I think it's like in my worst moments of like shifting in a pivot or, oh my God, I don't know how to talk about what I do, or just even kind of feeling blah, honestly, it is so much nicer to be on the other side of things. One, they're colleagues and they get it, whether they are like, you know, of your caliber or not, shall we say. Sometimes when we don't know what we are, we know what we are not. And so when you hear someone who does what you do talk about it, you can go, oh, yeah, interesting. I don't approach it that way. Or interesting, I approach it that way, and this is the piece that's different, right? So you can really see those similarities and differences. And those conversations for me, this is like one of those, like, your challenge, should you choose to accept it, is like, use that as a really good opportunity to just revisit your key messages about how you talk about what you do, or even just what your value proposition is, and say like, okay, if I was this person, I'd probably say it this way, but this is why I need to say this thing this way, because this is how I'm different. But also, I like it too because I am not for everyone. I'm not going to try to pretend to be for everyone. And frankly, I don't want to work with everyone. Like, I'm really good at knowing who I connect with and who I don't. And I'm willing to be surprised. And I don't have to like have a perfect, magical, like soulmate relationship with every single one of my clients. But when something doesn't feel right, sometimes I can think about my business coach colleagues, and that will help me see that it's not right and help me see that they're better for someone else. And I can then be a good business owner and refer the person out. And I do believe that like referrals beget referrals, right? Like you put the good out into the world and it comes back, maybe not from that same person. But I love this question. Thank you for asking. And that's absolutely my perspective. Not everybody feels that way, but then if they don't feel that way, they're probably not going to reach out to you to connect. Like they're probably going to be like, great, your competition, moving on. And that's fine too. Like you don't need to waste your time with that, you know? But that's a really, I love to pay that forward because that was such an impact for me early on. Okay, I hope that helps. So a couple of other things, if you've been to Real Connections, you've heard me say this a million times, so I'm just gonna say it briefly, especially for people who are new to me, but when you hop on calls, when you go to meetings, when you are networking, I think the easiest way to get out of the friend zone or to never get there in the first place is to make sure that you really balance both getting to know the person and getting to know the business. So oftentimes if people are, like I live on an island and I'm a scuba diver and I left the country 5 years ago, like that can be interesting for people to want to talk about, and I'm happy to talk about my life, but I don't want to spend a whole coffee chat talking about my life and they don't know what I do, and then they just say like, okay, well, if I go scuba diving, I'll call you, right? Like that's not really what I'm looking for. And so my job is to turn the conversation to the business, right? Ask the questions, say like, hey, like we could talk all day about this, but like, let's talk a little bit about business and how we might be able to help each other out, right? Just have like a little something that you want to get back to. But if you're focused back to the beginning, right? If we're setting a clear intention and we're being open to where the conversation goes and we have some sort of plan and strategy, then you can get on that call and say, my intention and my plan is to get to know the person, and these are the business things that I want to discuss. Have a plan, stick to it. Turn the conversation around to business. That's one of the easiest ways to also just not get drained, so that you're not just like, oh my God, when are we going to stop talking about scuba diving? Right? Again, I love talking about scuba diving. It is my jam. And sometimes I will go on and be like, Livingston, okay, that's great and all, and, right? But it's the both and, right? We also don't want to, like, one way to network, and I did this when I was in corporate and I hated it, and I hated it, was we never talked personal stuff. We only talked business. It was only what can I do for you, and people spouting their peacocking blah, blah. And I just like, I don't know, I'm like a bullshit detector anyway. So like, I just was like, I can't, this is not real, right? As a one-on-one coach, I'm not just enjoying one-on-one conversations. I'm also like kind of allergic to surface talk. And so like that just like did not work for me. So we don't want to err too far on either side, right? If you will burn out and feel gross and spammed if you're only talking about business, and frankly, if you're only talking about their business, right? You will feel friend zoned if you're only talking, I'm just going to use my example, if you're only talking about scuba diving, right? So finding the way to do the both and then finding the way to do the both and with the other person, right? So that everybody gets a little bit of attention, right? So if people don't ask about your business, start telling them about yours, right? If you've been spending too much time on theirs, go ahead and like give them, flip it around. That's your responsibility. But I find, again, that's one of the ways to not be drained and to not be friend zoned. Okay, that was number 2. Let me just quickly go through 3 and 4 because I've talked a lot about these. So this is about treating the call like a business call, right? Treating the call like a business call, right? This is how you don't get friend zoned. This is how you stay strategic. This is how you don't get drained because you're focused on business and you have a plan. So number 1, boundary things very practically, like boundary your time. How many calls a week or a month or whatever, or events are you going to do? And like really set that up and honor that for yourself. Nobody's going to hold your boundaries for you around that. Set that up, adjust as you go. When life is busy, maybe you take it back. When business is busy, maybe you take it back. You don't always need to be available. So setting boundaries around, like literally practically in your calendar, and deciding how much and how little you're going to do on a given week or month. I really like to wrap up calls with like identifying action items and saying like, oh yeah, I told you I would send you a link to so-and-so. I'll do that. And you're going to send me that. Yeah. Okay. Like kind of like you would in a work meeting, right? Like, okay. And here's our action items. Thank you. Goodbye. Right. Again, treating it like a business. And then actually following up, that's a lot of people's hard thing. I'm not good at that either. But actually sending the follow-up because people really appreciate it. And then they'll go, oh yeah, I was going to send you that too. And then identifying next steps, right? How are we going to stay in touch? A lot of times people are like, oh, let's just do another call. Why? Do you have a reason for another call, right? Sometimes that is the right answer. Sometimes it's just kind of like, almost like being on a first date and being like, I don't want to tell them I'm never going to call them. So the guy says like, oh, I'll call you, right? Like the classic thing, right? So like not getting into that either, but also not putting somebody on your calendar again that is like, well, we just did the thing. We met, like, we're cool. Maybe we could talk again if we have a reason to talk, but hopefully you've identified that reason so that the next steps are either to talk again or to say like, great, well, I'll follow you on LinkedIn and, blah, blah. Maybe you want to put them on your email list if that's appropriate. Like whatever the next step is, how you want to stay in touch. If you want to stay in touch, like letting that, again, that's just all part of treating it like a business and honoring your boundaries and your time and having a plan for that, having a strategy for that, knowing why. And we're talking a lot more about knowing the why next week. And I already talked about this, but I want to say it again. Like you're going to naturally make friends too in this process. Like that's one of the reasons why I love networking, because I have made friends. I have created some solid relationships with people that I feel like are my trusted colleagues. Most of my friends are not entrepreneurs. And so I really love that I have people I can call and be like, oh my God, did you ever just have a blah, blah, blah day? And like people who get it, that's so valuable. But that's the bonus, not the goal. If you're focusing on your business, right? Again, it's not that if you want to be friend zone and you only want to have friends, then awesome. But if you also want to have a business that is thriving and profitable and supports you financially, we want to make sure that we're not getting confused in our efforts going out and making friends versus going out and creating business relationships, which awesome if they could become friends. That will happen anyway. But that goal and that mindset around that and then having the strategy around that is the everything, honestly. And honestly, I think people respect it because a lot of people don't know how to wrap up calls. A lot of people don't know how to turn it back to business. A lot of people don't know how to navigate through the awkwardness. And if you just have a plan and you're like getting to know the person, but you also have business, boundaries, but you also have business goals and you want to let them know, like people really respect that. And I've actually had people say like, oh, thank you for saying that. I need to say that more, So you're paying it forward in that way too. Okay, I'm gonna check the chat and then I'm gonna do number 4. Yeah, for sure. I'm happy to refer when I know the person, Sheila, is a better fit for what the client needs. Exactly, right? Like it just, then it just feels like, oh, now I don't feel like I have to try to figure out how to force fit myself into serving this person. And it really works with the whole, if you give, you can take later, all of that stuff. How do you keep the call business forward without coming off too salesy? I think in a lot of cases that's an art, not a science, like not to sidestep the question. I think you also, if you're getting to know the person and you're getting to know the business, then how do I say it? Like if they're a good potential client, it kind of is already organically in the conversation, and you could say, hey, you mentioned like such and such. That's actually something like you don't even have to pitch them, but you can say like, you get it because you went through that. That's a good time for me to meet my clients. Like for example, one of the things that for my work, it's not the only thing that I do, but I often help people who are going through some sort of pivoty transition in their work. Especially if they're running 2 businesses, right? And kind of shifting focus from one to another. Or changing the percentage of time between one and another. I really, really love that space, right? So if I'm talking to someone and they're like talking about running 2 businesses, I don't even need to pitch them, but they will get it, right? They will get it either for themselves, or maybe they're already past that stage, or for the next person they meet to say like, that thing that you were talking about with 2 businesses, that's like one of my favorite things to do with clients when they first come to me, because I really find it interesting of like, how do you do that? How do you navigate the both and? How do you make the transition? Whether it's an all the way transition or you're just changing person. Like I can just talk about what I do, right? See, that's just so natural and easy versus like, well, here's my elevator speech, right? And so that's what makes it easier and more organic and why I like networking, because then you're already starting to have like people are getting who you are and what you do and who you serve. And then if that person on the line is a client, great. But if it almost doesn't matter in that moment, because they now get what I do and they've experienced that problem that I help some people solve. And so then they will that will link in their brain when they're going out into the world. So just as an example, right? I do think it's an art, not a science, and I'm not perfect at it by any stretch, but I think, again, like sometimes I'll just be like, I could talk to you all day about scuba diving, but I do want to like get to know about you. Tell me who you serve. Like, tell me who I should be looking out for. Like, I just always offer it. And I usually offer it first. It makes it easier for them to just talk about themselves and then make sure that I get my time. But I'll also just like have a little something like that helps to keep it focused. And they appreciate it too, because they don't want to be awkward, but they also probably want to talk business, you know? So I just think that's really important. Okay, and then finally, boundaries. I could talk about boundaries for years. I've done whole master classes on boundaries, but a couple of specific boundaries that I see get blurred a lot. So again, number one, identify them in advance for yourself. Know what your boundaries are. Know what you're willing to do and not do, and decide that first so that it's easier to like. So if somebody asks you something, you're not like, let me think about it. You just already know. And it's so, the friend zone thing, and frankly, this affects draining too. Like, it's so much harder to unwind from bad boundaries, which is why I like to like have that shit decided in advance and approach a conversation already knowing, having decisions made in your head, what you're going to do and what you're not going to do, so that when you get asked, you just know the answer and it's not personal and it's not, oh yeah, I don't have time for that right now, or whatever the thing is. Because if you say yes and then later you say no, it's just a harder, more awkward conversation. And I think that's true with all boundaries, but especially here. Personally, I think here's some places where people don't hold boundaries. You get to decide, are you going to say yes or no to these things? But these are some questions to ask yourself. Are you going to let somebody pick your brain? And if so, how much? Right? I could have a networking call with someone and they could be like, hey, what do you think? I'm doing this thing with my strategy and changing. Like, do you think I should change it? Is that fair? Like, okay, if it's generic, like it doesn't have, there's no rules, but I sort of have a like, I geek and kind of can't help myself. So like, I generally will like answer something in a generic way. And then I usually say, but I mean, to give you like a full answer, I would need to know a lot more about your business. And that's what I do with my clients, because I used to be a consultant and I like to really get to understand the nitty gritty, because I think it's important that it fits your business and it's customized, blah, 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 right? Like I could just go to that point. And it's easy for me to hold my boundary, but it's also easy for me to like give them a little nugget, but also to say like, I don't know, because I'm not in your business. I don't actually want to give you advice, like just like a lawyer would. But are you going to pick people's brains? Are you going to let other people pick brains? That's a place where that friend zone can kind of get funky, or boundaries can kind of get funky, and you can feel drained or used depending on how far someone takes it and how far you let it go. Trades, are you willing to do trades? If so, how much? What are your rules around that? That's a place where I see so many people get drained and unpaid and exhausted, and then sort of serving someone and then being like, oh crap, I don't even really need their service, but we had an exchange, right? So I think that's a really important place where I see a lot of people get drained when they could have gotten the sale instead, or when it just didn't need it. I think trades, I could do a whole long thing on trades, but I think trades have a purpose in so many places. Like if you're going to collaborate with someone and you've never experienced their work, like sometimes that's a helpful thing. If you're new to business, or you're trying out, you're beta testing some new offer or service, like absolutely a trade can be cool for that, but like make it small and bite size. And honestly, I think like let it be the offer that already exists instead of creating a new one for someone, and just pay each other, right? So there's other ways that you can do that. I just think it's an easy way where people sell themselves short and don't treat it like a business and treat it like a hobby and treat it like friends. And that's just, it's not, there's nothing wrong with that. But this is where I see, those are like the slippery slope moments. And so I just encourage you to really think that through in advance. And again, as I said before, I just want to say this one more time. Put someone into your regular process if you're going to do something like that, versus like trying to recreate something for somebody who's not going to even pay you. So I think again, that's a way that we can treat our business like a business and treat a networking call like a networking call. Oh, you're interested in coaching? Awesome. Like, this is my price, right? Not like, oh, let me just give it all to you, right? And then my final point on free stuff, that's not an offer. Like I have free offers, right? That's different. But free stuff that's not an offer or free stuff that's a trade is, how would your client feel if they saw that somebody else got it for free? Would they be okay with that? And that's often sometimes the thing that keeps me from the people pleasing on the other end. Because I would not want to have to explain to my client why they had to pay and somebody else didn't. That's not like that. I'm not a good coach with that. That does not feel good. So yeah. Okay. Let's see. Next time we are talking about how to make this, so really back to the strategy piece is next week, right? So I kind of went into boundaries today, sort of some setups, things to think about, and the mindset piece. And then next week we're going to be talking strategy. So I hope you join me there. And I'm just going to stop the recording. And if you guys want to stay put, you can ask me a question. See you soon.
Recording stopped.